fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. This is going to be an awesome one. I've got my boy Neal Combs on. I watched Neal for the first time in this upcoming Fish Finder Mastery course. If you guys haven't heard yet, we have been working really about 4 months on this with Captain Peter Deeks. And if you don't know Peter Deeks, the guy's got multiple world records, both redfish and trout and other species. He uses his fish finder, his electronics every single day. 300 days per year. And he was curious about some of the things that he wasn't maximizing on his machine. And he came to me after this was all said and done. He's like, Joe, I learned more about using a fish finder and how to maximize what I'm seeing on the screen than any time in my life. And this is once again a guy who's full-time. This is the guy that Bill Dance goes out with. And this course, I believe it will be one of our most powerful, if not the most powerful, online fishing courses, just to help you go out there and maximize your time, know exactly when you're in a dead zone, know exactly what you're looking on the screen. And I think the best analogy, Neal, that I heard Peter say is most of us, we spend a lot of money on these electronics and they're amazing, but most of us use it like we're a 95-year-old buying a brand new iPhone. We have no idea how to use it. And it's intimidating. And this is me too. I got on my dad's new boat and he's got, I think it's a new Garmin on there. And I was like, all right, I know how to use it to find the depth, but I was lost. And after watching this course, because I've been through and I helped film a lot of it too and ask a lot of questions that I was curious about. And it's not that intimidating once you know how to use your machine. And Peter went really, really far down the rabbit hole. They actually anchored down different objects from bonita to logs and actually bait fish, literally anchored them down under the water anywhere from 20 to 30 feet of water, and then went over them with different fish finders to see exactly to show you exactly what you're looking for. I don't think anyone's ever done anything like I've seen him do. And long story short, I'm so pumped about this. Completely blew me away. And when I hear Peter Deeks say this whole course blew him away and he learned a lot and it's made him a better fisherman, I'm like, all right, this is going to be awesome. And by the way, depending on when you're listening to this course, Fish Finder Mastery, will be for sale. It will have a special Black Friday price. I believe 70% off. We're going to do something crazy, and that's at saltstrong.com/fish finder. So saltstrong.com/fish finder. So Neal, dude, you were a big part of this course. You were the expert they brought in, if you will, and give us a little background on you and the trainings that you do. And you basically live and breathe electronics for boats.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. Absolutely awesome to be able to work in the industry and work with a great group of people and have the opportunity. So I come from a company called Navico. We look over Lowrance, Simrad, B&G, and CMAP. And I'm basically a retail account manager for Central, North Florida, and part of Georgia on the first job description, as you'd say. So I basically go from just north of Lauderdale, of course, up to that Savannah area, Pensacola, working with West Marines and Bass Pro, the larger retail group, on training with associates, customers, managing the locations, helping ensure that we have the right fit for what they're trying to sell. We don't want to be in a inland store having, units with only saltwater mapping. We don't want to be down towards Lauderdale and have depth finders that are only set for, shallower depths when you got the ledge, very close to the coastline there. So I get to work one-on-one with a lot of associates and customers themselves. And then I'm also in a key account position with our company on Dick's Sporting Goods and Field and Stream. So I get to look over all of our companies, sell-in, buy-in, working with the stores, better marketing, assets, and just trying to help the end user. And coming from the retail world helps tremendously, just because, as you say, you go in there and you look at all this data and these numbers and it's this means nothing to me. What am I looking at? So It's basically my job to help simplify this and make it as user-friendly as possible for the end users and associates just to learn and see what we're talking about, dealing with, because, as you said, it can be very intimidating. And the funny part is if you can just take a little bit of time, I know it's tough. I kept telling myself prior to getting this job, I'm like, I'm going to learn electronics. And, I'm like, all right, I'm going to bring just a couple rods with me. And I go out to the lake, and of course the fish are like schooling up or, they're blowing up on bait. And I'm like, all right, screw the fish finder. We're going to go fishing, And I finally ended up one time, I ended up leaving all the rods at home, and the girlfriend was yelling at me because she's like, you're going to go fishing. I'm like, I'll even leave all the rods with you. And I learned so much in that 1 hour period because there's no temptation. It's almost like going from a spinning rod to a bait caster. If you buy it and you're intimidated, you're not going to ever learn how to use it unless you actually go out there and put your hands on it. So the biggest advice I tell a lot of people is just actually, getting out there and, put your hands on the units. And at the end of the day, we do have a reset echo default. So if you mess something up, you can always go back and get back to those same settings.
Yeah, I saw that, and you guys cover that obviously in the course on how to do that with one push of a button, and that was makes it a whole lot less intimidating on screwing things up. And Neal's a very modest guy, so Peter explained it to me because we were trying to find an expert. Peter did all the on the water stuff. Like, man, we need to go like in a store like in a West Marine that has all these different from Humminbird and Garmin and Lowrance and Raymarine and Simrad, like has all the different types of units, and just break it down and simplify it, where, you can go out there and just maximize your time and not feel like you're stuck or you're intimidated by it. And basically West Marine and Bass Pro all said, well, hey, there's this guy who trains all of our experts in store, and his name is Neal. So Neal is the guy who actually trains the people in West Marine and Bass Pro who are selling all the electronics. So this is the guy. So I want to start off because I thought this was really interesting. I think in the back of my mind, Neal, I thought like Peter was going to focus a lot on this 3D stuff. And that's even like crazy because some companies call it side scan, and you got side imaging and what is it? Structure scan, side view. Scan. Yeah. It's like, dang. A lot of different
terminology.
Yeah.
All the same. It all means the same thing at the end of the day. And everyone just has their own piece just to try to key in on certain things, almost like, Safari being for your internet for Apple and,
right.
Google or Internet Explorer on your apps. And essentially it's all the same stuff.
Yeah, it's just like calling Safari, like a 92-year-old getting on a computer and saying, hey, I got Safari and I got Chrome and I got Firefox. Like, they're all different. No, they literally all do the same thing. They're just different names from different companies. But where I'm going with this, I thought this was interesting, is Peter Deeks, once again, who's got multiple world records, and he's an inshore guy. And this course, it's for anyone using a fish finder, but if you're inshore and nearshore, like, this will change your fishing game, guaranteed. Like, this will be the best investment you've ever made. And Peter Deeks, 95% of the time, is just using the 2D, just using normal sonar. And even, Dylan Hubbard, who's, one of our other fishing coaches, and they've been in business 90-something years, all of their boats are still using just the sonar 2D. And so let's talk about that first, just this maybe misconception, like, do I need to have the 3D and the side scan and down scan and all this other crazy stuff, or is 2D enough? Or, like, let's talk about kind of the pros and cons on that first. Yeah,
not a problem. So 2D essentially has been out for 50 plus years. Essentially, it's the same thing we've been doing. It just gets a clear image. It gets better with the chirp technology, which we'll go into here in a bit. But the biggest thing is, depending on what you're doing, how your setup is, because a lot of times on, like, the 2D sonar, it's going to be a much smaller, compact transducer. And again, take that with a grain of salt. The 2D sonar, we can go down to much deeper depths than we can with our down imaging and our structure scan. So you can reach, your 1,000 foot of water, no problem. And the great part about a 2D sonar is it's going from an echo. So when it's shooting the pulse down and it's coming back up, you're getting these nice big arches that makes it super easy to see your fish. So if you look at your down scan image, if you're going over, let's say, in 70 foot of water, your down scan image is almost a picture like of the bottom. So now you're taking let's say a 24-inch snapper or a 24-inch gag grouper and putting that on a scale of a 70-foot graph. It's going to look minute. So the great part about having that 2D sonar is giving you these big fish arches because it's actually having the return of the air bladder. So everything appears a lot bigger. The other nice part with our 2D sonar is you can actually run while on plane and still see stuff. So you can run on plane, be able to run up to 60 miles an hour. And the biggest piece I tell a lot of customers is knowing your boat. If you have a stepped hull, if you have an inboard motor, is knowing what transducer. And in the course, we actually go over what times to actually run a through hole, when to run a transom mount transducer.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, that is the same piece we've been using. You get a clear image. You can do the fish ID with it. Just makes it very, very easy to see what we're dealing with. But for most people, that's all they want. The only disadvantage that I see on our 2D sonar as opposed to going to the down scan is defining what we're looking at. So if it's a sand bottom or rock bottom, being able to see that, and then the water coverage. So most of the time on like a 200 kilohertz with a factory transducer, it's going to be normally like a 20-degree tone angle. Now, granted, on Airmar, they'll tell you on there, okay, if you're running a 5200, it might be bigger, it might be smaller, and they also make what's called a high wide. So it does give you the opportunity to cover a little bit more water, but we don't have the exact placement of that fish being on the left or right side of the boat as long as it falls under that tone angle. So the other big piece you'll hear a lot of people talk about is what's called chirp. It's going to be compressed high-intensity radar pulses. So if I have 200 kilohertz, pretend I'm taking an ice cream cone, I'm turning that down. It's basically just a cone angle shooting down to the bottom, coming back up. So the way I tell customers to picture that is I'm taking a rock, I'm throwing that in the water, and there's one ripple. That's my 200 kilohertz.
Okay.
Now on a chirp, it's going to be an array of frequencies. So now we're going from about 175 up to 225 or so. So now it's going 175, 176. So the way that looks now is instead of throwing a rock in the water, I'm throwing a bunch of pebbles in the water, and I can see multiple ripples. So this, instead of seeing a blob of fish, we can actually see almost every single fish. You can see all the arches. It just gives you much better separation and a clearer picture. And that's going to be on your 2D sonar as well, what we're looking at. So a lot of people talk about it, and they have a hard time understanding what it is. And that's the easiest way I can explain it to the customers, the whole rock scenario and the ripples and having a better separation of fish on the bottom and then fish in general that are balled up.
And what was the number? Was it like basically this sonar cone, like this upside down ice cream cone? Was it like 1/3 of depth? Like, so like at 30 feet, you basically have like a 10 feet wide under the boat. Is it something like that? Yeah.
So depending on the transducer itself, there's a really cool app. Actually, Demico makes one. Who makes Airmar transducer? You can actually download it. So let's say on the 20-degree cone angle, you can actually enter it into the app, and I can say, okay, in 50 foot of water, you're actually only going to cover with a 20-degree cone angle an 18-foot beam, which isn't much at all. If we were in 20 foot of water, we're only going to cover 7 foot. So that's one of the biggest disadvantages of not having that structure scan and being able to see out to the side. So most of the time, if I'm searching for a wreck, if I'm in even 20 foot to 50 foot of water, I'm able to cover usually 240 foot out to the sides, and now I can go back and forth. And essentially, the amount of time and fuel you save is absolutely amazing because we're not sitting here going back and forth and banking on trying to run over this wreck or this reef because we've only got a 7-foot cone or 18-foot cone diameter.
Yeah, I thought it was so fascinating too. I think we look at our screens, we kind of look at this chart on the unit and just assume that if you see fish, whether it be bait fish or, a big predator fish that you can identify. And we talk all about that in the course. And Deeks even has he's calling it like his cheat sheet swipe file where they've taken screenshots of fish that like they 100% know, like this is a redfish, what a redfish looks like on a 2D, sonar screen. Here's a school of snook. Here's different types of bait. But when you have something anchored down and you know exactly where it is and you watch it going by, you still see that. And you could be honestly 50, 60, 70, 80 feet past it and it's still showing up on your screen. I think a lot of us, especially if you're going too fast, you might see something like, oh man, it's still underneath my screen. It's underneath the boat. And that thing could be like long gone. And I realized just how powerful it is to really stare at the right side. Like that's the only real time intel is what's hitting your screen on that right-hand side at any given second. And once we went over, like we knew where this thing was anchored, we could see it. And like we were way past it, yet it was still showing up bright as can be on the unit. And I was like, man, that was a massive misconception that I personally had.
Yeah, I'll tell a lot of customers the biggest thing is right when you see that fish arch, you can actually go back, touch on the screen and mark it, or the other big piece is the minute you see something mark that waypoint. That way you can go back over it if it's a wreck or if there's a group of fish. If you're having your arches, most of the time, if you have that great looking little arch, that fish is sitting there. A lot of times when we're drifting, or you'll see the line, you'll get your pelagics, or you'll get just your schools of fish underneath you. And if we're in, let's say, 100 foot of water and a bunch of Spanish mackerel are coming through with the bait, you'll see lines, and those fish are actually moving. So with your arches, of course, most of the time you're idling, those fish are pretty stationary as opposed to they're usually swimming with you if you're seeing the lines or it's being drawn out. But that is one big misconception, as you said, on the screen there. So on our 2D sonar, that right side is almost live. If you were to drop your lure down, you can actually watch it on the screen with the return on there, which is absolutely awesome. I actually love fishing that way. We do it a lot in the bass world. And then depending on the current, you can actually do that bottom fishing as well. Drop your lure down and actually see it on the screen and see when you're getting close to the bottom and actually be able to jig it and watch your lure on there.
Yeah,
and then, nothing's better than actually watching a fish come up and crush it.
Yeah, that is wild. And we filmed, just for you guys listening, I mean, we filmed a ton of this and actually fished the same spots. And we were in, 15 to 20 feet of water. And we were doing this inshore, near some of the inlets and passes. And I mean, it's wild how accurate your fish finder can be when you know how to use it and you know what to look for. I think that was another big misconception, that I was looking at something thinking this was bait fish, and Deeks is like, no, like that's a school of Spanish mackerel underneath this right now. Or no, that's actually a school of snook or redfish. And I was like, wow. And and just watching how he uses it on a daily basis, just to know if he's in a dead zone or not, right? I mean, so many of us, I think we kind of use our fish finders kind of like a 90-year-old uses their phone, like maybe just to call people and text. And there's so many other cool things you could be doing. And I think a lot of us use the fish finder just to kind of see the depth, right? To make sure we're not going to run into sandbar and oyster bar or some hidden structure. And there is so much that you could be using this, even in 5 feet of water. This is not just for offshore fishing. You can do stuff in really shallow water too. It's crazy.
And that's the biggest thing. I tell, depending on what type of fishing you're going after, even running any back creek. So I'll give you an example. Is we have something that's called structure overlay, where you can actually take your structure scan on your Lowrance, Thermometer, B&G, and actually overlay it on the map. So I'd fished the IFA a couple of years ago out of Fernandina, and I'm unfamiliar with that water. And as we all know, they've got crazy tide changes of about 6 foot. So they have oyster bars all over the place. So going into these back creeks during high tide, I can actually sit there, and not only am I marking spots for where I'm trying to find fish, but you can use that as a safety hazard on your structure scan. So when I'm going into this back creek, I can say, okay, oyster bar here, 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 and I can actually make my get out zone. So now when the water drops 3 foot, I can actually have these waypoints that are marked as rocks or oyster bars and actually avoid these. And that's another big thing I try to stress with customers is try to make a key for the waypoints that you make. I have waypoints for what I have as schools of fish. I have one icon. I have one for rocks or oyster bars. I have some for grass lines. I have something that in my head, I know this is that defined piece. And then the other thing that I do for the fish side is I actually mark different colors for the fish through different times of the year. So I'll start with one color being spring, fall. So that way I can look at my chart and shuffle through if I'm catching my fish. And if I'm in spring and I want to see where I've caught, fish this time of year, I can actually sort through them and actually see my chart and tell just from the color. But on the structure scan side too, even on the West Coast fishing for tarpon, I've seen multiple times where, you got 10 boats out there, no one's catching anything. And we'll have guides pull up and you can actually see the tarpon on your structure scan and say, okay, they're 50 foot out this way, anchor up over there. And 1 out of the 10 boats is catching fish only because they know how to use their electronics. So I tell everyone, if you're in less than 100 foot of water, I would almost tell you to put a structure scan unit on the back of the boat just to be able to go out there and see these wrecks, be able to position better on them, and to be able to save time and fuel. I actually bring, when I go on my friend's boats, I actually have a portable unit where I have a suction cup transom mount transducer and a suction cup for my units. And I actually fished a Wahoo tournament about a month ago out of the West Coast, and actually suction cup my unit on the back of my buddy's boat and suction cup the head unit just because he didn't have that structure scan. And it's amazing how well you can get geared up. And the biggest thing is understanding what you're looking at. So I'll tell a customer to go on your structure scan screen, leave it on auto, and then idle past things that you know are there. Go past a bridge piling, go past docks, go past a drop off, That way you understand what we're looking at and run it on a different scale, whether it's 50 foot, go past it at 75, then 100. So you can actually say, okay, on this scale, this pole is this big. If I were to go offshore or go somewhere where it's not sticking out of the water, I know it's around this size. And the biggest issue you're going to have is your head kind of gets glued into the screen. I do a lot of graphing out at what's called Lake Conway in Orlando. And if you ever want to learn how to graph, that is probably one of the coolest places. Right there by the boat ramp, the sheriff's department has taken a helicopter, school bus, cars, and they've put all this only about 150 foot to 300 foot off from the shoreline. And you can actually idle by and make out the canopy of the helicopter, the tail wing. I can actually make out the front grill, the windows of the school bus, and I'll always be like running through with people, and I look up and I'm about to like run into a dock just because I get so amazed by that stuff. But the clarity on this stuff is just absolutely amazing. And it's just knowing what we're looking at. So one other thing I want to touch on is on the structure scan is I always tell customers to use what's called the flashlight theory. So if we were to have something small, let's say like a cup on the bottom of the ocean floor, or let's say even in your room, you turn on a flashlight, it's not going to cast a big shadow versus like a dock piling or a bridge piling that's very tall, it sticks up out of the water. If I turn on a flashlight, it's going to cast a long shadow. The same thing goes for drop-offs. If we're driving down the road and 50 foot down the road, or to have a dip in the road, your headlights won't shine on that, so you'll get the shadow. And same thing with fish. If they're in the water column, and you'll see that a lot with tarpon, if I throw a ball in the air, the shadow is not going to be attached to the ground. It'll be off to the side. So once you get that concept, you can actually start putting everything into place and start saying, okay, that's a drop-off, this is a bridge piling. And again, even if you're trying to get out of a creek, if it's real shallow, I can say, okay, it's dark right there. The channel actually drops off. I can idle that in, jump up on plane. So even at a slower speed, you can use it as a navigational piece, which is absolutely huge in my eyes.
So, I mean, that's so cool. So it sounds to me like, to just simplify this, the sonar 2D is what guys like Peter Deeks use for the most part, because they're looking for bait. Like he's using it to find bait and to find the predator fish, and he's got that dialed down. And that's a big chunk of this course, is knowing what you just said it, knowing exactly what you're looking at, and just as importantly, what you're not looking at. But the side scan and 3D side imaging, like that sounds like it's better for identifying structure and finding structure. Is that a simplified way to say it?
Yeah. And you can use it to find your fish as well. But majority of the time, I get customers that ask me all the time, hey, someone gave me a number and I can't find it. And, someone gives you a generic waypoint out there in 50 foot of water and you got a 18 foot diameter to go back and forth. You can find the structure, and of course, most of the time, if we're finding the structure, we can find the fish. So Once I go past it on structure scan, we can mark exactly where it's at, and that's where I'll run over. I'll mark exactly where that wreck is, and then I'll go back with my chart, go directly over it, and I'll go over it with 2D, and I can see, are there any fish hanging out on that wreck or that reef, and we can actually make out the marks and see is it active, is it dead, and then kind of take it from there.
Cool. So what are the biggest mistakes that the average weekend warrior, he or she has, invested a lot of money, and maybe it's a brand new boat or just brand new electronics. What's the biggest frustration, the thing that you see them doing wrong?
Basically being way too intimidated by the unit.
Okay.
A lot of people, with the touch screens, I tell a lot of customers, you should probably start with a non-touch, because a lot of people like to jump the gun. They're so used to their cell phones, and they just get button crazy. So they just start pressing this, and this, and then they get lost. So I tell everyone, when we look at the unit, it almost looks now, every single unit just about looks like a phone or a tablet. You got your major apps. It'll tell you right there on the home screen, charts, sonar, down scan, structure scan, and then on the side, waypoints, routes, trails. So what are you trying to do? The first thing is just read the screen, because a lot of customers just want to touch everything. And I tell people, just take a step back, So if we select charts, you'll have your menu most of the time on your right-hand side. So if we're trying to mark a waypoint, it'll tell you plainly there. So a lot of customers just don't even want the chance to read. They just want to look at it, and they just get overwhelmed just because there's a lot of words on there at times. So that's one big piece. The other one is auto. A lot of customers want to go out there and change the contrast, try to change the frequencies. For your average fisherman, that's going to be in less than about 150, 200 foot of water. That's just a weekend warrior. Auto works absolutely amazing. So like on our new Simrad, the Lowrances, any of our hero screenshots that you see, all that is set on auto. We're actually told not to mess with any of that when we take our screenshots, when we post these photos. And I used to drop down the contrast 1 or 2, and now the technology's gotten so good where I just leave it on auto. And the other big thing is we want to get these great screenshots just to show customers, look, we didn't have to touch anything. On the structure scan, the only thing I will adjust is just my range. I'll go it out a little bit further than I will. But once you get to that real deep water, one key note is the deeper water we go into, the lower the frequency you want to go to. So on like a structure scan, if we're in usually less than 50 foot of water, 60 foot, I'll leave the frequency on 800 because it's a high frequency. So we run what's called 455 or 800. So I'll run the 800 to that point. Now, once I get deeper past that, once I get past 50 foot, I'll switch over to 455. The picture's not as detailed, but we can reach out further. So now that we're in the deeper depth, we're in that salt water, it's not going to penetrate as far on a higher frequency. So that's where I'll change it. But again, for your average Joe that's in less than that 100-foot mark, I'll leave everything on auto and just have at it and just go out there and learn. And you can always go back into the settings and restore all your sonar defaults in case you mess something up. And another big piece is watching YouTube videos or watching into your documentary that you guys have done is just understanding the basics of it and understanding this is what the frequency difference is, this is what will happen on chirp, and then what we're looking at on structure scan. If a customer can spend about an hour on the water without any fishing rods and just going through that basic piece, I can promise you it will change your time on the water. And I have customers all the time that'll call me up or send me pictures after they learn their structure scan. They're sending me pictures of these wrecks or these big groups that they're catching now. And it's absolutely awesome to see, just what a little bit of time can do for you, because essentially you're on top of the fish now. We're not searching for them. You just have to leave it up to the cat team, not to find him anymore at that point.
Yeah, I was almost like getting upset with Deeks when we were filming because I imagined it had to be harder, and I was like, man, you're not even like touching your frequency or chirps or gain, and like I'm thinking like he's gonna be pressing a million buttons. He's like, dude, I keep everything on auto. He's like pretty much 100% of the time. He's like, these machines are smarter than us now. They know what's going on. They know how to read this stuff better than our eyes do. And he's like, I rarely, if ever, touch this stuff. Which is crazy. And I think that's another reason we get intimidated. We see all these different things and, hey, what does frequency do? And what's gain? And what's chirp? And what are all these different terms? And most of it is just kind of automatic. It's just the cameras these days, right? I mean, it used to be you had to really adjust all these, whites, whatever, the whites and stuff on your camera. Nowadays, like these new video cameras, you don't have to touch squat. We have a $4,000 or $5,000 like nice camera, and we leave the sucker on auto. Like all of our videos on YouTube and even Vimeo, like that's just 100% auto. Like it's all this technology is becoming smarter than us. It's crazy.
Yeah, the clarity is unreal, and it's one of those things to where now, what I find absolutely hysterical is back in the day, it would be a pretty penny to get structure scan. Now you have economical units. It's kind of like a cell phone. When they first came out, you couldn't even get a camera on the cell phone, and,
right.
And then the imagery just got better and better and better, and then the videos and the clarity is just amazing. It's becoming the same thing in the world of marine electronics. You can even have an entry level unit, a Hook 2, for example, even comes in. You can get a structure scan unit at $400. That'll do structure scan, down scan, your 2D sonar, and kind of take it from there. But it does absolutely amazing on the auto piece. So I tell everyone, go out there, play with it on auto, and then do small adjustments. Once you see go into the menu and then change the frequency from 455 to 800 and see the difference there, and then go back and then take the gain and increase the gain or take off some of the gain, and kind of play with it here and there when you're on fish. That way, when you're going through, you can at least say, okay, we're on them. I know they're here. Now as I'm doing a trolling pass, let me change this a little bit, and that way you can kind of get a better understanding and understand, what the difference is. Because at times, the water may be dirtier, or, the water may be cleaner. So it just depends. The conditions change. But again, auto works phenomenal. And once you get to that point, you can always adjust it. It's almost like, going to a bait caster for your average Joe, starting off, you're just going to leave it kind of tight so it'll backlash easy, and then you can kind of adjust it. But again, doing it for a living, 99% of the time I have mine on auto.
Yeah, it's crazy. And we're going to talk a little bit too here at the end about really just the best units and the best overall units for the money. I know Peter, I believe he's got a newer Garmin on that yellowfin now. And one thing that he learned through this course, he's like, Joe, if you're going to buy, a new unit, go as big as you can afford. He's like, it makes a massive difference. He's like, I didn't really think it did in the past, but he's like, it actually makes a really big difference. Do you agree with that about going as big as you can on the screen?
Yeah, because I'm 29. I don't know about you, but my eyesight isn't getting better. My number one complaint I get from customers is, I wish I got a bigger screen, because back in the day, we'd only have a chart plotter. You'd have a separate fish finder. Well, what happens is, you got these awesome, phenomenal units that do radar, they do structure scan, they do charting, they do 2D sonar, down scan. So now if you're trying to run all these screens at once to better optimize your fishing, you've got now this screen that's just, everything's almost becoming minute, because I've got my charts pulled up so I can see where the fishing spot is. I got my structure scan open. So I'm trying to find this wreck. I've got my 2D sonar open because I'm trying to see bait or any fish as well. And then if you've got your radar up, now you got 4 screens open on a 7 or 9 inch screen, and everything's just very small. So I tell everyone, if you can go as big as you can on the units. And at the end of the day, you got to learn how to use electronics. And once you learn how to do that, you're going to want the biggest screens possible. And it'll make a huge game changer for you on the structure scan, to be able to have everything open, because you're using multiple tools at once you get to that point. It's not just using just your traditional sonar. You actually have everything open, and you're understanding what we're looking at. And again, my biggest thing I tell everyone is, you're saving so much time on the water, because you can position up better. You're not actually trying to find where the spot is. You're just trying to see if there's fish on it. Now you're worried about catching them because we've positioned so well on them.
I mean, it's the analogy with the phone is perfect, right? I mean, can you imagine if you have, like, now we've got all these pluses, that if you're in the iPhones, you got the 8 plus and 10 plus, these things are massive. Can you imagine going back to your own flip phone and trying, to read an email on that old school flip phone that, like, basically had a screen the size of your thumb? And I think that's what it's like. I mean, the ability to zoom in and just to identify fish too. I mean, that was something cool that Deeks did. And I think the trick that I learned, from him is it's a little bit of time on the water, and a lot of it's too just knowledge, which is a big thing we teach in our insider club is, knowing what fish should be around. Like he could point to something right away and say, that's Spanish mackerel. Like he even said, like, that one's a cobia right there. Just knowing what he knows about the area and the water column. He's like, that's probably a cobia. Right there. I mean, that was like, wow, like, how would you know that? And lo and behold, we go over stuff and you can actually see it in the water. It was crazy doing this on some pretty clear days. I was blown away by it. One other thing I want to kind of pivot, because, on this course, it was mostly about just how to use your fish finder, how to read it, how to maximize everything that you're seeing on the screen. You guys also talked a little bit, I believe in your part of this course, on waypoint maps versus like chart plotters. What is the difference, if any? Like, that's something too that I think confuses a lot of people. That's all part of your electronics.
Yeah. So back in the day, we used to have what was called a waypoint map. The units would have GPS, so it would be basically a screen that would just be a white blank map, and then it would mark waypoints and your routes, and that would be it. It wouldn't have actually charts built in. So a couple years ago, all your units, we'd have your entry level where they were just fish finders, and then you'd have your chart plotters. Well, everyone started coming out with what's called the waypoint map. So what a waypoint map essentially is, it's almost like a buy one, get one free. Just the technology's there, and they can build the units for so cheap with this waypoint map. So it basically has your fish finder built into it. And then on the waypoint map, again, it's just going to be a blank white screen to where we can mark our waypoints and leave our trails. It's not going to have the actual maps of the lake, the depth ranges, all that on there. So for the person that's just going to, they just want to know the depth, they're fishing in a backyard pond, something like that, or maps aren't irrelevant to them and they may want to mark a waypoint here and there, that's where a waypoint map would be okay. You'll find those on your economical units on the cheaper end. But on the chart plotter side, that's where you'll actually have your maps built in, so I can see, the coastline, I can see Mosquito Lagoon, Haulover Canal, Lake Toho, things such as that nature. It'll give you all that data on there. So, of course, we need a bigger processor. You need to have more memory built up for that. So that's why those units cost more money. But you will get on the very lower end, the waypoint map. And I try to steer my customers away from that just because on the chart plotter side, again, it depends on what you're doing. I shouldn't say I try to steer them away. Depends on what you're doing. The average person that's going out to the lagoon or trying to go offshore, that's not going to be suiting their needs. They're going to want to be able to see the 1 foot contour. They want to see any wrecks, be able to see what they're looking at, the inlets, channel markers, the waypoint map. Again, if you're doing something towards, the pond side, if you're running back creeks, if it's a little dingy, something like that, that's where most of those people will run that. But big misconception between the two. A lot of people try to insert charts and you can't add that. You can't buy a CMAP chip and try to insert it into there. It won't take it just because it doesn't have the compatibility with that end. It's just a slower processor and as opposed to the actual chart plotter itself.
Got it. Super, super helpful. I know in the course you guys talk about transducers. What's just kind of an overall big mistake people make with that, or maybe a misconception?
Yep. So probably the biggest misconception I get on boats is, hey, I get on plane and my transducer doesn't work. This unit stinks. And it doesn't matter if it's a Simrad, a Lowrance, a Garmin, a Raymarine, a Humminbird. All these units can run on plane. They can run up to 50, 60 miles an hour and still take bottom. The biggest thing is installation. So I'll get a lot of customers that don't install the transducer properly, or they think they install them properly, and the boat is what we call a step hull. So you'll see this a lot on like yellowfins. You'll see them a lot on bass boats, to where it looks like it's the very back of the boat, but about a third of the way up the boat or 3 foot from the transom, it'll actually dip down a little bit more. So what happens is once the boat gets up to a certain speed, it actually causes turbulence. You'll get all this bubble and this wash through, and since the transducer needs clean water to peg down and come back up, with all the bubbles, turbulence, no transducer can read through that. So what ends up happening is you'll get that blank white screen and you won't get any depth. And there's plenty of pieces. You just go online and type in transducer installation. If you even go on Airmar's website, there's plenty of websites that'll show you how to properly install the transducer on there. So at times we might need a through hole. If you've got, a center console boat that's fairly large and the step hole is a third of the way up, you may need a through hole, and then you can transom out your structure scan. But that's going to be the number one issue that I find with customers is just incorrect placement.
And is it a lot of it just because they're doing it themselves and not going to an expert, or what? As scary as it sounds, it's a little bit of both. And when I say expert, I use that word lightly just because someone does something for a living. Doesn't mean they're good at it necessarily. So I've actually been to a handful of boat yards, and I've seen people, doing installs for 10, 15 years, and the install's done incorrectly, which is just absolutely crazy. But majority of the time it's just incorrectly mounted, and they do have adjustments on there on any transducer where you can actually drop them up or down about half an inch. So if you're close to that install point to where it needs to just get dropped down, and I've even seen on a transom mount, I've seen an eighth of an inch make all the difference in the world. So it can be intimidating at times, but once you get it set, then you can run up on plane, and then it's always nice to have that reinsurance factor when you're running these back creeks or knowing what the actual depth is. Absolutely. That's good. And another thing, speaking of speed, was just how different these objects are on the screen. Even just 1 or 2 mile an hour difference. Like, actually, I was like mind blown. I was like, oh my gosh. Because once again, in this course, Deeks was taking down with a scuba diver, like taking down and anchoring things down and then going over at different speeds and different machines. And it's like, whoa. So talk about that. Any tips on ideal speed, especially, I actually take any depth you want, but I know in this course, a lot of it was more for that inshore, nearshore, saltwater angler. What are some tips on speed to really maximize what's on your screen on your fish finder in terms of bait and predator fish and structure?
Yep. So the biggest key to have on that is current. So current has a lot to do with that as well. The other piece can be the clarity of the water at times as well. So I got some phenomenal screenshots this year. I actually got a couple shots of boats underwater, and you actually see the railing, the outrigger, the VHF. You actually see the rope that the boat had attached to it. And usually we say the ideal speed is 2 to 6 miles an hour. This year I was doing a lot of in between 3.5 to 4 miles an hour, and being able to calculate, with the wind and the current with that, It can be tough at times to stay exactly on it, but usually that 3.5 to 4 miles an hour is usually that perfect speed. So what I'll tell customers as well is, depending on your install and how the transducer sit, because some boats may sit, the back of the boat may sit way down in the rear at a certain speed. So go past a couple of things that again, run past that 2 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour, and then 4 miles an hour, and see what looks best. Because, of course, the faster we go, the shorter the image is going to look a lot of times, just because we're going past it a lot faster in the scroll rate of the actual unit. So I would usually 3.5 would be my key target number, I'd say. Now, if you're fast trolling, you can go a little bit faster because we're using our 2D sonar as opposed to structure scan. But your biggest influencing end is really going to be on that structure and down scan.
Got it. And so when you say current, you're talking about, adjusting based on the speed. If you have obviously current ripping, then you're going to want to meaning it's not going to affect the view per se, like it's not going to affect your transducer. It's just more about the overall speed of your boat going over the bottom and over what's below you. Is that correct?
So it's mainly for the speed. So I'll get some customers that try to look at RPM. So if I'm going 2,000 RPM against the current, it's going to be different if I'm going with it. So I usually always try to use speed over ground and be able to keep an eye on that on what we're doing.
That makes more sense. Got it. Cool. All right. So let's go to the question that probably everyone has. You do this for a living. You live and breathe these things. What are your favorite units, brands, types? And let's go on a different layers, right? Because you have some people who are just getting into it. They probably don't need the most expensive high-end one. And both, the finder and the transducer, give some tips on what you tell people, from beginners to hardcore weekend warriors to the guy or gal that says, hey, money's not an issue. I just want the best.
Yep. So a couple questions I always ask the customer is when we go into, they say, I want a fish finder, is what type of boat do you have? Do you have inboards or outboards? So then that way I can know, do we need a through hole or do we need a transom mount? The next piece is, what are you doing with it? What depths are you fishing? Because some units allow more power. Like on our NSS Evo 3s, you can plug a 1 kW transducer into it so that can transmit more power. We can go into deeper water, as opposed to a Go Series, great unit that handles a 600 watt transducer. So trying to find that customer, if you tell me, hey, I've got a John boat, and you come to a car lot, I'm not going to sell you a Dodge four-door dually four-wheel drive. There's no need for that. So that's basically the analogy I try to give people, and vice versa the other way. If you're trying to fish in 1,000 foot of water or 1,500 foot, you can't expect this economical, cheap unit to do that, to reach down to those depths. So, just because it has four wheels and a hitch doesn't mean that Ford Ranger is going to pull that 39 foot contender. So the biggest piece is how intense you want to get with it. Are you just basically looking for maps, your bottom, and to see fish here and there? If so, we have what's called the Simrad Cruise. Super easy to use unit, very simplistic. It comes with a very small 2D transducer. It'll do your 83, 200 kilohertz, as well as medium and high chirp. It doesn't do downscan or structure, so it doesn't have that ability. It has coastal charts loaded on there. We can add charts to it if need be. The next step up would be what's called our Simrad Go line. So this one does structure scan, it does down scan, traditional sonar. It's a touch screen. It can connect to your XI5 trolling motor. You can actually run radar with it and an autopilot, and that is a phenomenal unit. And for the average person that's wanting something a little bit more advanced, that weekend warrior, this is that perfect unit to get into. And a 7-inch unit around that $800 range, depending on which package we get. And then on the 9-inch, you can get one for about $1,100. So great units there. If money's not an option, or you're trying to get that 1 kW, you're trying to get the full system, you want them to talk to each other fully, that's where we have our NSS Evo 3, and this is going to be a fully networking MFD. So if I have 2 units in the boat, or I want 2 units, this one will share charts, transducers. All we have to do is get what's called an Ethernet cord, and Ethernet shares data. So I can plug my sonars into one unit, and then it'll share it with all the information on the right. So there's no need for multiple transducers or interference of frequencies or anything like that. So we can actually share all that data. And that one's for those guys going a little bit deeper, someone that wants the best of the best, fast processor. And it's actually a dual hybrid. It has both buttons and a touch screen on there, and it's a phenomenal unit.
And I know you represent multiple brands. How do you navigate that, right? Because some guys swear by Garmin and some Simrad and some Lowrance and Raymarine, and like there's all these different brands. What are some helpful tips on that?
So the biggest thing is what we're doing. So we're really big with integration. So we work with Suzuki, Yamaha. Our sonar technology is phenomenal as well. So we get to work with, we have like what's called fish reveal, where on downscan it's tough to see fish just because, they become minute. So being able to take your 2D arches and overlay them on the downscan. So depending on the technology you're looking for, all the brands have structure scan, downscan. The biggest thing is trying to fit what you're doing. So being able to have a company that's, technology savvy on being able to have the structure overlay, the fish reveal, stuff like that. The only time I would tell a customer, if you're looking for something else, is if you wanted to hook up to a Minn Kota trolling motor, then you'd have to have have a Humminbird unit, because those two work together. If you want a motor guide trolling motor that works with their Lowrance or Simrad unit, you can have those two talk to each other. So it just depends on, any of that integration side. So thankfully we're able to have a very open integration system on that end, and be able to work with multiple companies. Even like PowerPole, for example, we can connect our Lowrance units to the PowerPole wirelessly and actually put them up, put them down from the Lowrance themselves.
Crazy. So what's next? Obviously you live and breathe this. What are they going to think of next, right? Is there anything new that's coming out on the market in electronics?
Nothing too crazy. We are on the freshwater world releasing our trolling motor. So the big thing that you're going to start seeing here in the near future is going brushless, and it's absolutely phenomenal, because if anyone runs a trolling motor, that having your batteries last all day can be a huge drag. So we're actually getting with the brushless motors 59% more efficiency at 1 mile an hour. We're getting 50% or 53% more efficiency at 2 miles an hour. So the cool part about that is, it turns your 10-hour day into a 16-hour day, which is a pretty long day. But you got a quieter trolling motor now with the brushless, because you don't have the actual brush in the water. The brush is going to be in the head of the trolling motor. It's compatible with either a 24 or 36 volt. So depending on, there's nothing worse, in my opinion. Back in the day with my bass boat, I bought an 80-pound thrust trolling motor. Thought it'd be enough. Was, trying to stay on a budget. Wasn't enough. I had to sell it, then buy a 112-pound thrust. Had to, change everything out. So now with the brushless motors, you can either run a 24 or 36 volt system. All you have to do is buy an extra battery and switch that piece out. So it's absolutely amazing to see it change. And it's just funny because, you get a Lowe's or Home Depot and all the drills, the cordless ones, they're all brushless. And now you see the fishing world going to that end. And the other big piece is the integration side of it. Being able to control your lights, your radio, have that full network straight from your actual MFD, which is just phenomenal. Bilge pumps, everything is going that way. So you'll still have your relays in the back where you can do all that, but you're going to have these cleaner installs and dashes with the boats where you can just do everything from the MFD.
Dang, crazy. Allowing you to hunt fish faster than ever. Everything.
Yeah, the funny part is the clarity too now. 10 years ago, you would have never thought you can go on side scan and see the fins of the tarpon, or on down scan and actually see the actual clarity of the fish. And now, we can, like Conway, for example, I can go over and actually see the windows on the school bus when we idle over it. So the clarity just gets better and better. I'm super excited for what is to come. And the biggest thing I tell everyone is I just feel there's a lack of knowledge on the electronic side. And if you learn these electronics, you go out there and play with them, I can promise you it'll change your entire world on fishing, and you'll actually end up catching a lot more fish and put a lot more in the freezer.
Oh yeah, it's all about investing in yourself to maximize your time, and then that's the reason we came up with this course, because Deeks had the same thing. It's like, man, I don't feel like I'm maximizing my fish finder. And turns out he learned quite a bit. The one guy, we watched a ton of videos on YouTube just to see what was out there, and there's a lot of pieces, but no one filled in all the gaps and put together hey, here's everything you literally need to know to maximize it. But I remember this one guy's comment. He says, today's electronics are so good, I can see the fish laughing at me. And it's so true. The Bill Dance, I don't know if Peter shared this with you, but Bill Dance actually is one of the bonus guest in the course. And I think I don't even remember the name of the new technology with Garmin, but you could literally see his crankbait on the screen, and you could see the bass hitting it. I mean, it's spooky how much you could see. And it reminded me of that comment where the guy said the electronics are so good you could see the fish laughing at you. But I mean, you could see a small little crankbait going across the screen. I mean, in pretty good detail. It was wild. So you guys are going to love this course. Go to saltstrong.com/fish finder. See if it's available. If not, there'll be a place you can put your email in, and we'll shoot you notification when it goes live. And Black Friday is the official day, and we'll have a massive sale that Black Friday that you can take advantage of. So it's saltstrong.com/fish finder. Neal, where can everyone find you? Or are you all over the place and doing instructional things and teaching people? Or what's the best way to connect with you if people have questions?
I'm almost like Where's Waldo, but I'm easier to find. Just imagine not all the people on the map. So since I covered the West Marines and the Bass Pro Shop, the biggest thing I tell customers is, if you're in the Florida area, stop by, talk to your electronic specialist or store manager and say, hey, when is your rep going to be in this area? I usually have a pretty set schedule for where I'm at, and that way I can work with the customers. So I have it happen all the time, and it's just phenomenal. Customers can come in and be able to get that one-on-one talk. We can go through the user interface. We can do any of that on there. And it's just, again, it's amazing. I get so many customers, and it makes my day to be able to say, they came in for 30 minutes to talk to me, and we went through the user interface, and boom, now they're catching all these fish. They're sending pictures of these big catches and, these awesome shipwrecks in the water. And it's the biggest thing. Just stop by any of the stores and say, hey, do you have your Navico or Simrad rep in the area? Or know when he's coming in, and we can set up an appointment and talk some electronics.
Cool. And Neal plays a big part in this actual course. So if you like what you heard today, this is just a taste of it, and all video based, all online, interactive, really, really cool. And so I have to imagine there's going to be some people even like me that I want to ask you a few more questions offline about specific units. Do you have Instagram or Facebook or email or anywhere else that someone could reach out that would be appropriate, not completely inundate your message box?
Yeah, you can email me at Neal, Neal.Combs, Combs, at navico.com, or you can find me on Instagram. It's NSCombs, so first name Neal, middle initial Steve, and then last name Combs, and that's on Instagram as well. So feel free to reach out, send me a DM or send me an email, and I would love to talk to you guys.
Awesome, man. Well, you did an amazing job. The course you did just a crazy, amazing job. It's so tough to find people like you that truly know your stuff and live and breathe, electronics, especially marine electronics like this, and can still get in front of a camera and just nail it. I was blown away with everything I learned, and man, you added a ton of value to it. So thank you so much.
Not a problem. I'm glad it went well. I'm usually horrible. It's funny. I can speak in front of a group of people. I used to do presentations at Bass Pro on top of the fish tank in front of everyone. And you put one person with a camera in front of me, and I would stutter. I could not speak. It was just the funniest thing in the world. And even with Western Marine, I tried doing a clip for them about a year and a half ago, I'd say. And it took me probably 15 minutes to do about a minute-long clip. And this Salt Strong video, actually, I think it went fairly well. I didn't have to have any cuts or take any takes or anything like that. So I was quite amazed. So just a good group, and I'm very excited to be able to, help everyone get to know their products, and hopefully everyone's able to take the time and watch that and put it towards the water. There's, at the end of the day, there's no substitution for time on the water.
Yes. Guys, if you like this one, once again, go to saltstrong.com/fish finder. We even have a couple little pieces, little splinters that we've taken out of the course to kind of give you a little taste of what it looks like. And once again, reach out to Neal if you have any specific questions. And like always, the one way you can help us out big time is to subscribe to the podcast, either on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen. Subscribe and leave a review. That is so helpful. It helps this podcast get found in the crazy algorithms, helps us get great guests like Neal, and helps it just make it easier for us to keep growing this sucker. So, guys, thank you so much. Go to saltstrong.com/fish finder right now, and we will see you hopefully inside the course. Neal, you the man, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Chat soon.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. Find us on the water. fishing in her soul.